I think Al really gave us some ideas, at least for me, for future holidays. So stay tuned on that, okay? All right. And an important message that I took from last night was from Mother Teresa as well, that we must empty ourselves so that God can fill us. And that means just emptying ourselves of what is it really from God in us. So let's welcome Al for our second evening of our parish mission.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm always been accused of having a big mouth, so I want to... Welcome back. Those of you who were here last night, I wish I could offer you a plenary indulgence, but I don't have that authority. But maybe it's time off purgatory because he came back to put up with me again for another night. Thank you, Father Todd, as you said. Last night we talked about emptying and how Lent calls us to emptying. And today we're going to look at the flip side of that coin and talk about what are the things we need to be filled with. Okay? So why don't we, to set the tone for the night, why don't we begin with prayer, shall we? Let's remind ourselves, this is something, one of the things I do in my job is I welcome or I help to prepare people who want to come into the faith through OCIA, what used to be called RCIA. And so I work with adults coming from different faith traditions or maybe never been baptized at all. But one of the things that's consistent when I meet with people is the sign of the cross. A lot of other faith traditions don't make the sign of the cross. And so it's something that they're not familiar with. And so I take some time to explain what we do. You know, when we make the sign of the cross, we touch the parts of our body that we're told to use in thinking of God. To love God with your mind, with your heart, and with all your strength. And so we touch our head, our heart, our shoulders. Obviously, it makes the cross the symbol of our faith, but it also reminds us of the ways that we're supposed to give all of ourselves to God and to our prayer. And as Catholics, I think I'm guilty. I don't know if anybody ever do this when you start a prayer. You know what I mean? We do this kind of like, makes you throw a fly in front of me. It's like, you know. And we need to be, I think we need to be intentional because it's a prayer in and of itself. So what I like to do when I start prayers is I'll say, let's remind ourselves that we are in the presence of our God. And we do that very tangibly by touching those things that will hopefully bring us into closer connection with God. Okay, so we're going to make the sign of the cross together, and then I'll lead us in prayer. Does that make sense? So let's remind ourselves that we are in the presence of our God by signing ourselves in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and loving God, we thank you for this day, for the blessing of the sunshine and the promise of spring and warmer days. We thank you for the blessing of Lent, this time of preparation, this time of trial, this time of emptying our minds, of our souls, of all kinds of things that could keep us from a right relationship with you. I ask you to bless our gathering, to bless those who are present, to bless those who could not be here. Please send your Spirit to this gathering, into our minds, into our hearts, so that we can not only know how to best empty, but to make room for you, to be filled with all good gifts that you give us. Help us to be aware of those gifts, so that we can in turn be empowered to go out and to share those gifts with the world in need. I ask you in particular to be with anybody who is suffering in mind, in body, or in spirit, that they know your healing presence. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I didn't ask you this last night. How's your Lent going? Is it going good? You know, I remember as a kid always saying, what are you giving up for Lent? What are you giving up for Lent? That was always the thing. What are you giving up for Lent? And it didn't take me long as a kid to probably, to get back on the train of what I was giving up. I'm giving up candy. 5 days in, I'm eating candy. If you're somebody who said, I'm going to commit myself to giving something up or to doing something, to have a different change of heart, a different practice, or patience, whatever, and if you have failed, you can keep going. You can pick yourself back up and keep going again and start over. That's the beauty of our faith, that we always get a permanent redo, a do-over. So that's a good thing. Do you remember where we were 16 days ago in regards to our Lenten journey? 16 days ago, we were Fat Tuesday. I don't know if you can see this. I think this is hilarious because I mean, it's like you get the pashkis out, get all the desserts out, and just drink out of the crap. It's interesting because we do this. This is not a judgment. We do this on Fat Tuesday on Mardi Gras. We fill ourselves before we empty, which is interesting because Lent is a time of emptying. And so as we've been talking last night and we'll continue tonight to some extent, we need to be able to empty ourselves so that we can fill ourselves with good stuff. Not with this kind of stuff that doesn't last and is not good for you. Of course, if we were to have this kind of buffet for you tonight of sweets and stuff, I always tell people when I have adult formation stuff, Bible study, whatever it is, we always have snacks of some sort. I think donuts and coffee are like one step below sacraments. What do you think, Father? I mean, you don't mess with donuts Sunday. But I always say if it's a church-related function, there's no calories. I don't know if that's official or not, but that's got to be a doctrine somewhere. At least I'm going to be told otherwise. Anyway, the idea of, all of this doesn't last. It's fleeting. It's not really the thing that we really need to satisfy ourselves. We need something deeper. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Last night, as Father Todd reminded you, we talked about how we need to empty. Tonight we're going to talk about filling. And I'm going to get to the name of this title of this particular evening in a minute. But first I want to introduce you to a early 20th century philosopher named Simone Weil. Now this will give you a glimpse into the pathetic nature of my life and what a geek I am. I love philosophy, and I love reading philosophy. And I know it's weird, but my wife thinks I'm nuts. We go on vacation and I'll take a book that is probably, I should have just left it cold. But I love this stuff. Simone Weil died at the age of 34 in 1939. And she was a wonderful philosopher. She was a brilliant mind. She was a Jewish woman who was what I would call a cultural Jew. She wasn't a religious Jew. She wasn't practicing. She was Jewish because that's how she was, the family into which she was born. But she was a brilliant mind. And she wrote many, many books in her 34 years of life. One of them is probably one of the best known is called Gravity and Grace, where she talks about anything that weighs us down is gravity. Anything that any worldly possession is something that weighs us down and keeps us from our relationship with God. Anything that's grace lifts us up. It's just a beautiful metaphor, I think, of understanding our faith. I love this line: grace fills empty spaces, but it can only enter where there's a void to receive it. Now, Simone Weil was one of these people who lived what she preached. She died at 34 years old of something they didn't know what to call. They didn't know what to call it in 1939. We all know what it's called today because our society has changed, and because of Karen Carpenter in particular, she died of anorexia. She got to the point where she would eat so little that when she would take some food, because she was so sick that she would vomit it up. She couldn't keep it down. She literally emptied herself to death. And what's interesting about Simone is her writing is so beautiful, but it's also, you can read between the lines and see some pain there because she's searching endlessly for something to fill herself with. And she can't find it in her family origin of the Jewish faith. She couldn't. She was drawn to the Catholic Church. She was drawn to the mystics of the Catholic Church. She was drawn to the mystery of the sacraments. But for some reason, she could not get over the hump to say, that's what I want to land on. And even if she would have lived a lot longer, perhaps she would have gotten to that point. But unfortunately, she emptied herself completely, and it's like she didn't know what to fill herself. It's really kind of a sad thing, but it's a cautionary tale for all of us that we can empty too much, but we're not meant to stay empty. We're meant to be filled with good things, with God's grace. We hear Jesus say that. You will be filled. It'll be overflowing. My cup overflows, the psalmist says. So we're not meant to stay empty. We're meant to be filled, but with good things. So she's a cautionary tale of sorts. Like I said, the psalmist says, Psalm 23, probably the most famous psalm or the most beloved psalm that there is, right? Psalm 23. My cup overflows. And you know, the word overflow, the idea of being filled or fill up, appears in the Bible hundreds of times. The idea of being filled with God's love, to being filled with God's grace. All of this, it constantly reappears. Now, last night I taught you a Greek word that means empty. And I said Christ went into the desert to empty himself. Do you remember the Greek word? You didn't know there was going to be a test today, did you? It's going to be a quiz. It's the teacher. Anybody remember? Kenosis. Excellent. Thank you. Kenosis. It means to empty or emptying. When Jesus went to the desert, he emptied himself. I'm going to teach you another Greek word tonight. In the New Testament, when we're talking about this idea in the Old Testament, we're talking about filling ourselves. The word is pleroma. Can you say pleroma?
Pleroma.
So you didn't know you were going to learn Greek, right? 2 words of Greek. You can impress your friends and family now. Next time you're together and say, hey, if it's an Easter celebration, I'm going to pleroma my plate. You know, don't do that. There you go. But it's an interesting point because it's the idea of not just filling our bellies like we saw in that meme, that the guy eating all the food. It's being filled with the good things that we need to be filled with. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this past century, 20th century, there was a poet who wrote a poem and it became a song, kind of like a folk song. And I love this phrase. As I go along my journey, I'm reaping better than I've sowed. I'm drinking from the saucer because my cup is overflowed. And so this idea of drinking from the saucer, if you saw that title, you might think, what does that mean? Is anybody in here of Czech tradition, of Czech nationality? My mother-in-law is 100% Czech, and she's got family over in the Czech Republic. And this is a Czechoslovakia, now just say Czech tradition, where at Christmas, at Easter, at weddings, it's a typical thing to have a tea or coffee cup with a saucer, and then you would pour it, and you would purposely pour so that it goes over into the saucer. So that when you drink, you're drinking also from the saucer. It's to remind you that the goodness of God overflows in our lives. The blessings that we've been given overflows. And when we drink from the saucer, that's the extra stuff that God is promising us. So it should be always a metaphor or a reminder to us that we have God's goodness in our lives, and it's overflowing. It's not just a cup full, it's a cup full and then some. It's always more than what we. And think about this. Think about when Jesus feeds the multitudes. What do they do? What do the apostles do after everybody's eaten? They pick up all the leftovers, right? They put them in Tupperware containers to go home. No, they didn't have that. 12 baskets of leftovers. They have leftovers. It's always an abundance, more than what we need. Every miracle that Jesus performs, there's a lot that goes into the miracles. There's a lot that tells us why he's performing these miracles. But there's 2 takeaways that I'd like you to think about. Anytime Jesus performs literally any miracle, there's 2 reasons he's doing this beyond the obvious. Someone's sick and they want to be healed. Someone's hungry and he wants to feed them. But there's 2 reasons beyond that. Number 1, he's buying time. Because the authorities who want to put him away see that he's got power, and they're afraid of him enough that they keep him at arm's length. They're like, we got to do something, but maybe not yet, because he's showing power. So he can continue to preach. But the other thing, every miracle shows us, it gives us a glimpse into heaven. What is the kingdom of God like? There's no blindness. There's no sickness. There's no hunger or want. In fact, there's an abundance. There's no death, only life. Every miracle, if you ever read any of the 4 Gospels, read the miracles of Jesus and think about how does this miracle point to heaven, to the kingdom of God. Every one of them does in some way. And they're always about being filled. Not just to be filled, but overfilled. 12 baskets worth. So, something to keep in mind. Based on this tradition, there's 3 things that you're asked to do in the Czech tradition. You're asked to recognize, see it's overflowing, to recognize your blessings. This is why we do this at Christmas and Easter, at weddings. The Czech people will do this at those celebrations. You recognize the blessings that God has given you. What do you think you should do after you recognize them? You should do what? Say, thank you. Yeah. Gratitude. I'm grateful for this blessing. And I'm so grateful for it. It's so abundant in my life that I can't keep it to myself, so I have to share this blessing with others. It's exactly right. That little overflowed cup, drinking from the saucer, has all 3 of these kind of inherently in them. I recognize God's blessing in my life. It didn't come from me. It's from God. I'm grateful for it, and I want to share it. Isn't it beautiful? I have a brief, and I say brief, it's less than a minute long movie clip that kind of exemplifies this, okay? So I'm hoping you pay attention. There's music, but you don't need to hear the music if it's just, there's no language or talking here. like the teacher last night. You expected to be a tearjerker, weren't you? I caught you off guard with that one. Is that not the most precious face right there? Could you see blessing there? Could you see Thanksgiving and she wants to share with others? Those little boys, did you notice they bowed and you could hear, but they were like, oh, thank you, this is so nice. You're not doing our game today, this is so nice. They always do, right? I had to lighten the mood after last night. The last night's movie was really good, would you agree? That it was excellent, but come on, we gotta have some fun. So, anyway, anyway. When we do this, when we drink from the saucer, we recognize God's blessings, even that they're overflowing, that we're filled with them, we can then take the posture of Atsu, which means I am here, I'm present. And that posture, you see this is the pastor at my parish, Father Tony Zipper, has this statue in his office, and he's taken it, and he's used it on retreats, he's taken it everywhere to use it, and you can see it's cracked, and it's chipped and everything else, but he still has it front and center. And this posture is this openness. It's a physical, bodily posture of openness. I'm going to hold my hands out, and here I am, Lord. I'm ready. I've been emptied. I've emptied those things that need to be purged from my soul, from my mind, from my heart. I'm ready to receive the blessings that you're going to give me. Here I am. We hear that phrase, here I am, a lot. We hear it in the Old Testament, we hear it in the New Testament. We sing it, right? I'm not going to break into song right now, but it's a posture, not just a physical posture, but a spiritual posture of saying, yes, give me your blessings. And sometimes blessings aren't always what we think they are. Sometimes they're not easy to recognize. Sometimes they come in difficult packages, right? Suffering can be a blessing. Would you agree with that? I would be willing to bet everybody in this church right now has lived long enough to have experienced something that was bad, that was a suffering or trial, that upon looking back at it, you've realized maybe that was for the best. Would you agree that you've had that experience at least once in your life? Yeah. Humans live life forward, but we understand it backwards. We don't always understand God's presence or God's purpose until we can look back at it. But to be always open to say, here I am. I don't like this maybe. I don't understand it, but here I am. Fill me with what you need to fill me so I can get through this, so I can do this. We see this in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians when he writes about this. We're earthen vessels. An earthen vessel. If I had an earthen vessel here, which is like a clay pot, and I dropped it, what's going to happen? It's going to shatter. We're fragile. We are easily breakable people. Right? Can I dare say that we're all cracked pots? I mean, if you think about it, we're all like that. We're earthen vessels, but we hold a treasure. God has given us, He's filled us with His life, with His grace, with His peace, with His joy. So it's a great gift. I don't know if you're familiar with this parable about the water bearer. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But if you haven't, it's always good to hear it again. About this master of a house every day would take two water jugs, two jars like that, big jars like that, and he would attach it to the end of a pole, each one to the end of a pole, and he would walk down this long pathway to the water. He would pick them both up and he would take them back to the house, used in the house. One of the pots was cracked, and it realized that when the master would walk down to the water to clean up, the water would leak out of his crack. And when he got to the house, the master got to the house, he thought, I feel bad because I don't have a lot of water to give him now. And he felt bad about this. And he said to the master, I don't know why you don't replace me. I'm a cracked pot, I'm of no use to you. And the master said, what I want you to do is this. Next time I go down to the water, I want you to pay attention to the path. Pay attention what's on the path. And so he did. He went down the next day, he got 2 jugs of water, and the cracked pot starts leaking, and he noticed that on the way up the path, there were flowers that had been planted on his side of the path. Only on his side. When we got to the top of the hill, the master said, do you realize what gift you have? I know you're cracked. I know you're flawed. And I'm using it for good. You are watering the flowers that will grace my home, that will make it beautiful. It's because of your gift that you see as a flaw that I'm using with my grace as a gift. And we're all crackpots. If we say, Atsum, here I am, warts and all, earthen vessel and all, scars, hurts, right? We've all suffered in some way. God can use that. God writes straight with crooked lines. God can use that for something good if we just assume that posture of here I am. I don't understand it, but use me. I'm a cracked pot. Let me water your flowers. That's what it comes down to. Everybody knows Leonard Cohen. He wrote the song Hallelujah, which is very famous, kind of a pop culture icon kind of song. He wrote a lot of other songs too, and one of them he said, "There's a crack in everything, and that's how I like it." It's a great line to think about. But when we think about our flaws, I'm going to go back to somebody I talked about last night, Vincent van Gogh. Remember I shared with you a painting last night? I want to refer to that painting again in a minute. But this is Van Gogh. We have, I think I said this last night, maybe I didn't. We have about 2,600 paintings by him, just under that. About all of them. More than 40 of them are self-portraits. He did a lot of self-portraits. You can go to the Chicago Art Museum and see at least one of them. They always have at least one in rotation. So that's not too far away. This one is fascinating to me. I love this one. It's called Self-Portrait with a Bandaged Ear. Now, let me just put this on the back burner for a minute. How many of you do this? And this is not a judgment, because I do this too. How many of you go someplace and you're with somebody and you're like, hey, let's take a picture. And you're like, okay, straighten the hair. How do I love it? Do we not crane a little bit? I love wearing glasses because I need them, but I'm somewhat self-conscious of them because I've seen too many pictures where there's a glare, and I just don't like it. So if someone's going to say, hey, let's get your picture, first thing I do is like this, hey, I can't see you now, but I'm going to smile. I do that a lot. If you watch, this is a shameless plug, I have this weekly web series called Fish on Friday, and it's free. I'm not making money off it, I'm just letting you know it's there. People have said, you don't have your glasses on in here. I'm like, yeah, I'm filming that sucker blind, It's because the glare of the lights and everything else, I just don't want to have my glasses on. Anyway, I digress. What's interesting about this is, here's a chance for him, Van Gogh, to paint a self-portrait like we do in those pictures. I'm going to make myself look really good before I paint myself. And what does he do? He paints himself with a bandaged ear. Now, do you know why he has a bandaged ear? You all know this. It's like he cut his ear off. He lived with another artist named Paul Gauguin, and they had a huge blow-up, a huge fight. And Van Gogh was kind of going crazy. He had a lot of mental issues, and he was losing it. And he could not, this was like the straw that broke the camel's back. When Gauguin left him, he didn't know what to do. So he took a knife and he cut his earlobe off. And he put it into, this is a true story, he put it in like a handkerchief. And he walked downtown and he gave it to a lady of the evening that he knew, not in a carnal way, he just knew her. And he gave it to her and he says, here, this is for you. And he went back home. Now, can you imagine, what is this? So she didn't know what to do, so she said, I'm going to take it to the authorities because I don't know what's going on here. And he was clearly blind. So they went to his house and they saw him in his bed asleep, and he has this bloody ear. And so he was committed to an insane asylum. It's at this point when he's in the asylum that he paints Starry Night. I think I mentioned this last night. The one painting, it seems like that for sure one painting everybody knows of his. He painted that when he was in the asylum. And he was there, and he ends up committing suicide later, which is really sad and tragic. But while he is in this asylum, he's got this ear bandage, and this is what he decides to paint. This is one of the first things he paints. He doesn't care that the viewer is going to see him, looking his best. He paints himself as he is, warts and all. With his suffering, with all the trials, with everything that the bandage implies, his woundedness, his flaws, it's on full display. Now, why am I telling you this? In 1998, this painting, the actual painting, now that you're seeing this as a print, the actual painting in 1998 sold for $71.5 million. $71.5 million. I'm going to make the assumption if we all pooled our resources in this room, we couldn't come up with $71.50, maybe. $71.5 million. That was in 1998. It's been assessed at almost 3 times that much since then. So whoever owns it is for a big windfall if they want to sell it. But isn't this how our God sees us? Our God sees us as invaluable. We cannot fathom the amount of money, if you will, if you put it in those terms, that our God, the way He sees us, warts and all, bandages and all, suffering, wounds, sinfulness, He still sees us and wants to fill us with Himself. What a gift that is. What a blessing that is. To recognize that despite all of the ways I'm a cracked pot, God continues to love me and to share His grace with me, His life with me. It's crazy how invaluable each of us are to our God, that we're all loved that deeply. I think about this painting, and I can't help but wonder, when we hide what's wounded or broken in ourselves, that which is unattractive, that we think is unattractive, we hide what needs to be healed and what needs to be forgiven. Reconciliation is not an easy sacrament because you have to come face to face with your brokenness, with your woundedness, and say, yeah, you know what, I need help here. I need to be filled with your grace, not with this woundedness anymore. You know, we need that redemption. So just think about this in the silence of your mind for a few seconds. Can you be vulnerable and ask God to fill you with grace? Can you extend that same dignity and that same mercy to others? Well, it's tough. It's tough. It's like that movie last night. You know, do we want to look at a baby to see that kid's brokenness, to recognize that he was broken, the teacher was broken? Can we do that with each other and for each other? Now, last night we talked about, I showed you the cafe chairs at night. You remember this? I really added this in because I neglected something I wanted to point out to you that I think is important. Remember I talked about the symbolism of this is like the Last Supper? There's one other detail I forgot to tell you. If you notice, over here, there's an 8-panel window. Can you see that? And here, you can only see this part of it, but it's a 6-panel window. Okay? They're all different. There's only one 4-panel window in the painting. And it's right over Christ. Here it is blown up, as if to indicate that that's the cross. So we know that that's Jesus. And because I forgot to mention it last night, I just wanted to make sure I brought it back up to your attention. Isn't that just brilliant? Just love that. So what I want to do is this. I want to put this back up here, and I'm going to tell you a modern day parable. This is something I saw on social media. It was making the rounds. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. But I just want you to think about this as I read this. Imagine yourself holding a cup of coffee. How many of you drink coffee at least one cup a day? Okay. Imagine yourself holding a cup of coffee, and someone comes along and accidentally bumps you, and shakes your arm and makes you spill the coffee everywhere. Why did you spill the coffee? It's because someone bumped into you, right? This parable says wrong. You spilled the coffee because coffee was in your cup. If tea had been in your cup, you would have spilled tea. Whatever's inside of the cup is what will spill out. Therefore, when life comes along and shakes you up and bumps your arm, whatever's inside of you will come out. So each of us have to ask ourselves this question: what's in my cup? When life gets bumpy, what spills out? We can spill joy and gratitude and kindness as easily as we spill anger and judgment and negativity and choices. Isn't that a great lesson? Think about how different our world would be. Just forget that. Think about how different our church would be. Think about how different our families would be. Certainly our nation would be if we were not filled with such anger, animosity, dare I say hatred, for the other, as opposed to kindness and gratitude and joy, patience, humility. What we are filled with will spill out when life gets rough. When something bad happens, we'll either lash out or we'll embrace. I mean, that's the choice. So what we fill ourselves with, we have to be very careful about that. So what I'd like you to do, I did this last night, I hope it was not too painful for you. I'm going to ask you to turn and talk to somebody for a minute or two next to each other. I'm going to put 2 little questions up on the screen here, just to have you ponder so far everything we've talked about. And these are the questions I'd like you to consider and just discuss for a few minutes. Think of a time you've been bumped and what's spilled out of you. Be as open about this as you want to. You don't have to keep dark secrets, but there may be a time when you might have overreacted in either a good way or a bad way. And in what ways have you been filled by God? Do you understand what I'm asking? So 2 questions just to think about. Just take a minute or two, turn to somebody, either in front of you, behind you, next to you, whatever, and have a conversation, and then I'll call you back after a minute. Okay? All right. Thanks. All right, I'm going to call you back. Now, some of you might be worried because last night after I had you talk, turn and talk, I asked you to share. This might be personal, so but instead of asking you to share, I'm going to share 2 stories with you. Can I do that? I'm going to share a story that refers to both of those questions from my own life. I was just thinking, this is where my brain goes sometimes. I was just thinking, as you were talking, I was looking at this. How many of you would be honest? How many of you would be really bothered by the coffee spilling over that much, making a mess over your counter? So, when I've been involved, what's a lot of you? When I was, in a previous life, when I was at, my first job in ministry I was a DRE, Director of Religious Education at Sacred Heart Parish in Racine for 6 years. And the last 2 years of it, I was hired in 1995 to teach at Pius. Lived in Racine with my wife. Okay? We have a little daughter and one on the way. And I'm working at Pius full time, and I would go home at night and I would work for religious ed at my parish. So I'm going from Milwaukee to Racine. I'm driving about an hour one way, and I had 2 jobs basically. So every night I would literally go from Pius and I would go to the parish. And I didn't always get to see my daughter. And it was that was in itself frustrating. But I remember it being late spring, and we're knocking on the door for First Communion. I don't know if you do this here or not, but a lot of parishes for First Communion will have kids make banners. Do you do that here?
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? And so I go from Pius to Sacred Heart, and I'm in Racine, I'm at the church, and I'm getting ready. It's like a Thursday or Friday, and I know that weekend we're having all the First Communicants come, and we're giving the materials, this felt piece for this banner. And I'm doing my counting, I'm double counting, and I realize I'm like 10 pieces short. And I'm so frustrated because all I want to do is go home. And I'm just, you know, it's just in my mind, I'm just filled with frustration and angst. And so I have to go to, what was the name? Minnesota Fabrics. That was what the name of the place in Racine. I don't know if they still have one. But there was one in Racine in this little strip mall. And it wasn't too far from our house. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to Minnesota Fabrics. I'm going to get some of this felt, and then I'm going to go home. So I drive and pull into the parking lot. It's a strip mall. So you know what a strip mall looks like. So you go up, and there's a 4-way stop. Okay? So I come to the stop sign, and I notice that there's a car coming this way, and I'm assuming they're going to stop, right? And so I got my blinker, and I'm going to turn left to go to the corner where Minnesota Fabrics is. And as I'm turning, this van doesn't stop. It keeps coming. And I, at the same time, slam on the brakes and hit the horn. This person screeched their brakes, I'm not kidding, 2 inches from hitting me. And I was so frustrated that I waved at them with not one, but 2 fingers. Both hands went up in the air. I have to show you. We're in a sacred space. The first impulse I had after taking my hands off the wheel was to salute them. Now this is the kicker. True story. In between my 2 fingers, I look through my windshield and I see Sheila Fox. That means nothing to you other than the fact that she was one of the moms whose kid was going to receive first communion. And I remember going, oh my gosh. And I remember her mouth being like, and I just kind of turned and I went and I got my phone, went home. I felt terrible. Absolutely terrible. That night I told my wife, I'm like, I should probably call. I don't know what to do. I feel terrible. She's going to think the worst. I'm supposed to be teaching first communion, and here I'm doing this. You got to be kidding me. Phone rings. It's Sheila. She said, Al, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I didn't see the stop sign. I was trying to get home. I almost hit you. I feel so bad. I said, Sheila, did you not see what I did? She goes, know what you're talking about. I'm like, don't even answer, Sheila. That's all. I told her, I fessed up. I told her. But you know what's interesting? I was bummed at what spilled out of me. The first thing was that instant, that road rage that we hear about. Of course, I didn't do anything to the car, but you know, that anger. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't justified to some level, but I don't know. It's probably not that extreme. But the idea is, when we're filled with that kind of stuff, that's what's going to be the output. You know, that's going to be the output. And we'll be forgiven for times when we have stress and anxiety in our lives, but to stop and think. And if that would have been just anybody else, I might not have worried about it, because it had to be apparent to our first community. Oh my gosh, brutal. A way I've been filled by God. My dad, for his whole life, sang in choirs. He sang in an a cappella, get this, an a cappella, meaning without accompaniment, an a cappella barbershop choir group of men called the Racine Church Singers. And they would go around the Midwest to any denomination, Catholic, didn't matter. This group was about 60 men. And they sang beautifully all kinds of religious hymns. And they would go to a Catholic church, Lutheran, didn't matter, all denominations. I'm going to have 6 kids, all 6 of us. They sang at all 6 of our weddings. Just beautiful 4-part harmony, just gorgeous. My dad had a wonderful voice, beautiful voice. And every Christmas, what these men would do is they would, this is in Racine where we lived at the time, they would rent 2 school buses about 2 weeks before Christmas. One would go to the north side of Racine, and one would go to the south side of Racine, and they would sing to shut-ins, and they would sing to go to old folks' homes. They would sing to people who couldn't get out to the malls and to the churches to hear Christmas carols. So my brother Dave and I, we sang in choirs throughout high school. I was in the varsity choir at chorus at Marquette University, so I sang a lot too. So he said, you guys should come with us. So this became a tradition of ours. My brother Dave and I would go with my dad, and we'd go with these men, and we'd go in school buses, and we would sing to people. Sometimes we'd stand outside and sing through the window because they couldn't leave their homes. It was unbelievable. And I cannot tell you how prideful I was. I'm embarrassed to say this. I thought, man, I am bringing Christmas to these folks. I was bringing Christmas to these people. And I think we all had that sense. The best part of this, at the end of the night, we'd all go back to one church hall, and the wives were there, we'd making chili and stuff and beer. We had a great time. But anyway, I digress. The point was, we would do this, and we did this for several years. One year, we were asked to go to a home of a man who had cancer. He was probably in his 30s. He had bone cancer. He had a broken neck from the cancer had eaten away his neck. He had a brace, like a brace around his neck. He had 2 tube wires. His bed was literally like a hospital bed. He had lost one arm to amputation. He was so infected, he had to have one arm cut off. Now I remember, we all got out of the bus, and we're all boisterous and everything else, and we get into this little house, and we go into this room, because he can't go anywhere, and we are literally crunched into this room around this hospital bed. There's nothing in the room but this hospital bed guy and us. And so Bob Ball, who's the director, says, whatever his name was, I don't remember, says, we're here to sing for you. is there a song you'd like us to sing? Well, his throat was so eaten away he couldn't talk. So he went like this. And somebody realized Silent Night. So Bob hits the pitch pipe, and we start singing Silent Night in 4-part harmony. And it was beautiful. And this guy starts to cry. And he gets done. We get done with the song. He's got one arm. Couldn't clap. He went like this. As he's crying. I'm telling you, every man in that room was crying along with him. We sang another song or two. The first one was Silent Night. I'll never forget it. We got back. This boisterous group of guys, kind of single file, go back. We get on the bus. Nobody's talking. The director, Bob, gets on and he says, "Gentlemen, that's Christmas." I can tell you right now, this is like a legendary story. My brother David and I retell the story. When my dad was alive, he would tell it. My mom would say, "Christmas dinner, tell the story again." And we knew what she was talking about. We have told this story so much that my children, our collective the grandchildren of my folks, know this story. It's become kind of like one of those family things we say. In what ways have I been filled by God? I have never looked at Christmas differently since then. I've looked at it differently since then, I should say. I've never looked at it the same. I was filled with something that presents, all that stuff, it didn't matter. It was crazy how much it has changed my view of Christmas for the better. What we thought here, I thought we were bringing Christmas to you, he brought Christmas to us. And, talk about being filled. We had to be emptied of something, had to be emptied of our preconceived notions that somehow we were Santa Claus here, or we were bringing Christmas, when in fact he brought Christmas to us. Does that make sense? Just a wonderful story that I think about. And I know it's kind of a downer, but it's a good downer, right? And all this talk of spilling coffee and stuff, I saw this, I just thought, if you like coffee, you'll like this. Spilling coffee is the adult equivalent of losing your balloon. So what I'd like to do is this. Sometimes we'll go on the internet. I'm not a big internet guy, but I do like to go when I have a purpose. So I'll say, I want to look up something, or I want to find something. And so I find a lot of stories, a lot of parables and stuff that I can use, like I was tonight. I'm going to share with you 2 or 3 stories that I've gotten from the internet, okay? And what I want to do is show you the picture that's associated with them. There's 2 stories like that, and one's about a great movie clip. And what I'm going to do is show you, so like for instance, here's the first one, and I'm going to read the text that you saw, but I want you to just look at the picture. When I read it, so this is the text up there, okay? It's kind of small, so I'm going to read it for you. I just want you to focus on the image of that little boy while I tell you what this story's about, okay? And then I'm going to ask you a question. Not to share, but just to talk out loud. This is what the text that accompanied this picture says. When I'm feeling sorry for myself, I remember this picture of a dear little Jewish orphan in Austria who was absolutely delighted to have received a new pair of shoes from the Red Cross in 1946. He's a Jewish boy in Austria in 1946. He had survived the Holocaust. And look at the face. Look at the shoes that he's wearing. Can you see? I don't know if you can see from where you're at. They're ready. So when you look at this picture, you think of this story. With what is this little boy's cup overflowing? Joy. Gratitude. Maybe not taking something for granted. Do you take shoes? I take shoes for granted. I have more pairs of shoes than I need. I can guarantee you that. That's not a judgment. Again, we need shoes. We have different shoes for different occasions. It makes sense. But can we be more appreciative of them and not take things like that, the everydayness of those things, for granted? That's what a story like this can really do for us. We can be filled with that appreciation and also be filled with this sense of, I'm not going to be complacent with this. I need to make sure I'm thankful to God for this blessing. Because you know why? My cup is overflowing. And I'm drinking from the saucer when I can look and decide between different pairs of shoes. That's what we're doing. We're drinking from the saucer when we have multiple pairs of shoes to take from. Here's another one. I saw this. I'm going to read this to you. The young man sitting down was struggling with his tie. The woman in the red coat, you can kind of see her back. The woman in the red coat noticed and asked him, "Do you know how to tie it properly?" The young guy said, "No, ma'am." She tapped her husband and said, "Come to this side," her right side. He was standing on her left side. "Come to this side and teach this young man how to tie his tie." The older gentleman moved without hesitation, almost as a reflex response, and he gave the young man a step-by-step tutorial. Then afterwards, the elder gentleman watched the younger gentleman repeat the steps and show him that he knew how to do it. I was some distance away, but close enough to hear the exchange. And I even got close enough to snap this candid photo of the tutorial in progress before everyone hopped on the train. I love this. That's what he said. Whose cup was overflowing in this story? And in what way? I really want you to raise your hand because few people talk at the same time can't understand. Stay. What do you think? They both did? How so? How so? Where did you see? Whose cup was overflowing? In what way? Yeah, I'm sure it made the man feel good. Yeah.
I think it was the fact that sometimes you wouldn't even see what the person was like, you know, where you wouldn't even attempt that because that's not what you do.
Okay, yeah. He certainly had to let go or empty himself of some things, right? Any kind of preconceived notions, any kind of, I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to say I'm going to help you, right? You know what I'd love to know? I don't know if you think about this story, I would love to know if the young man remembers still how to tie a tie. And if he does he think about the older guy in the show? Or the mom, the woman who said, hey, come here and help him, you know? This coming Sunday at Mass, we're going to hear the story of the parable of the fig tree. You know, the orchard, the guy wants, hey, this thing hasn't produced fruit, and hey, give me another year, I'll put some manure around it and everything else, right? We'll keep working at it. I'd love to know, it's a parable. I would love to know what happens to the fig tree. Does it end up producing fruit? You know, it's kind of like left empty, I think, because we're probably the fig trees, you know, and we get to live that out. That's just my thought on that. But I think when you think about whose cup is overflowing, that young man had to have been grateful. He must have been grateful. You know, and again, at the very beginning I said this, when we're grateful, we recognize the blessing, we're grateful, we can't help but share it. So then not only does he think about this maybe, but has he taught somebody else this skill? Has he changed his temperament because of this one small act? You know, it's just amazing what this can do. It can produce 12 baskets of leftovers, if you let it. All right, this is the same kind of thing, but it's a video clip. I don't know if you've seen this. This is about a minute and a half long. You don't have to hear what's going on, you hear noise, but you need to be able to read. Can you read the screen? If you can't from where you're at, you might want to stand just so you can read it, because it tells the story of what's going to happen, okay? Can you read that first line there? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start it. Boy, it gets better. Isn't that great? What emptying took place in that movie? There was some emptying going on. What emptying took place? What was filmed? Either one of them, you can answer. What do you think?
Even though he put in so much effort to win that game, you don't always, just because you put the effort in, you don't always win, but there's something more than
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Something beyond just the wins and losses. Were you going to say something here?
Yeah, I mean, the little boy was obviously a fan of the team he won.
Yeah.
He was so humble that he
Yeah.
recognized he had comfort that guy.
Absolutely.
You know, without his own enthusiasm.
And if you're familiar with soccer, Portugal and France, if you're familiar with soccer over there, this is like, it's like just a step below religion. So, I mean, for this young man to not say, I'm in your face because we beat you and go back to your country and all that kind of stuff, which is would not be unusual, correct? To hear something like that. For him to say, hey, it's okay, to give him a hug, and then to wait So I'm not like seeing it, like rubbing it in your face. Holy cow. Emptying himself completely in terms of humility. What about the guy who lost? Couldn't have he said, hey, punk, I don't want to hear it, we lost. Couldn't have he? He had to kind of humble himself in a way to say, you know, that's, man, I'm touched, thank you. Some things are deeper and more important than sport. That idea of how we connect with each other as humans. You know, it takes a lot of emptying in terms of, you know, I'm not going to rip on you, I'm not going to make fun of you, etc., so that we can be filled. I just think it's a beautiful little video. It's what, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, something like that. So last night I did this, and we're not done, but last night I did this. I gave you a chance to consider some questions I put on the screen, and I gave you a few minutes to reflect. Do you remember that? Do you all have your booklets still? If you don't, you can maybe get one for you. But in your booklets, the questions that were put on the screen are in your booklet. If you are somebody who is like a journaler, you can write. If not, the questions are on the screen. I'm going to play a little bit of light music just to have you think about these questions, contemplate them. Give yourself, I said this last night, and I mean this wholeheartedly, give yourself this gift of time, of quiet, to just think, to contemplate, to pray, because it's busy out there. So you've got a chance in here. So just take advantage of that, the quiet, to think about what these questions may mean. Okay? And here they are. Again, they're in your booklet if you want to look at them there too. In what ways does my cup overflow with blessings? In what ways do I fill others with blessing? And what one specific thing in my life needs emptying? And with what one specific thing do I need to be filled? Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to think about this. said this last night, the music I played last night was about 4.5 minutes. This was about 3.5 minutes. Just 3.5 minutes of silence. Isn't that amazing? I keep using this term, and I hope you don't get tired of me saying it. It's such a gift to give ourselves that. Because there's just so much out there to distract us. So many voices. So many things vying for our attention. To just be quiet and still, light music or whatever. I say this all the time. Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. It's a good gift to give to yourself. We're coming close to the end, but I want to, before we have a final, like a small prayer service of sorts, I want to share one more piece of art with you. And I like sharing this. I use this piece of art a lot. And I don't care what the talk is about. I don't care what the topic is about. I think it just works with everything. Now, it's one of my favorites. One of my favorite artists is Caravaggio. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's called The Incredulity of St. Thomas. You all know who St. Thomas is, right? What's his nickname? Doubting Thomas. Is that unfair? I think it's unfair to call him that. Isn't it sad that that's what he's known for, that he doubted? Let me ask you a question. Raise your hand if you are here right now and you've never doubted your faith. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so we're all doubting Thomases. We're told, if you read the scriptures, we're told that Thomas, the name means twin. Thomas, the name means twin. Okay? What we're not told is who is his twin. I think it's interesting. I'm not saying it's a literary device, but it's interesting to think that Thomas' name is twin, and he shows us twin emotions: doubt, and then when he sees Jesus, faith, my Lord and my God. And aren't we all on that spectrum somewhere? Don't we fluctuate between, I don't know, is this real? Doubt and faith? We're all somewhere in that. And sometimes we're more in a state of faith, we're like, I'm all in. And other times we're like, why is this happening? Right? I think that's normal. I think Thomas gives us that idea, or that permission, if you will, to feel like that's normal. It's not a bad thing to doubt. It's more troublesome if you stay mired in doubt. I always use this example, and my wife's not here, so I can use this. I've been married almost 32 years, and there are times when I've doubted my relationship with my wife. But you know what happens is, I typically will say this: for everything I've seen, everything I've experienced, all the good stuff, it makes me say, there's reason I'm staying in this relationship. And then what I do is I recommit myself to it more. And that's true with our faith, is it not? Why me, God? I'm going through a tough stretch right now. I don't know why you have it in for me, God. It's not a bad thing, but to say, but you know what? You've blessed me. My cup overflows. I gotta hang my hat on that. I'm gonna recommit myself to this relationship with you and reinvigorate it. And that's what things like Advent and Lent give us time to do. This time of preparation gives us time to say, okay, are you gonna reinvest in this relationship you have with your Lord? I think it's beautiful. This painting is just awesome for a lot of reasons. And I say this not to insult your intelligence. But it's such a human thing to look at something like this and think it's a photograph. You know it's not. Okay, he painted this right around year 1600, and it's Caravaggio's interpretation of when Thomas sees Jesus. You know the story. Jesus raises from the dead. He sees the apostles. Thomas is out doing something. And when he comes back, the apostles say, we see the Lord. And he goes, I'm not going to believe it until I touch his wounds, right? And so this is that moment. Very dramatic. This is the Baroque period of art. It is very dramatic, and it's trying to re-emphasize what we believe as Catholic Christians. And I love it for several reasons, not least of which is if you look at the elbow, Caravaggio paints it as such, like it's almost coming off the canvas. Like to nudge you and I, like, where are you? Do you doubt? How much do you doubt? How much do you doubt, Gal? Do you believe? Are you prepared to say, my Lord and my God? It's interesting because you notice the seam in his shoulder there is ripped, it's falling apart, to expose a flaw. Like a Van Gogh, the brokenness. With his doubt, he still comes to Jesus. And this is the thing that I love about this painting the most. What does Jesus do for Thomas? Within this painting, he reveals himself to Thomas, and then he takes his hand and he guides him to himself. And I'm here to tell you, Jesus does that for us. He reveals himself to us through people, through experiences, suffering, through nature. He reveals himself to us constantly, and he guides us to himself lovingly. Even when we doubt, even with our brokenness, even with our bandaged ears, even with our cracked pots. He's constantly pulling us, drawing us back to himself. In every sacrament we celebrate, is Jesus saying, here I am, I'm revealing myself, come to me. That's what Lent is about. I think it's just beautiful to think about that, to think about these questions, just to silently think about this for a second. How does Jesus reveal himself to you? I bet there's a myriad of ways he does. How does Jesus guide you to himself? How has he done these things? And is your heart filled with doubt or with faith? Can we fill our hearts, can we empty our hearts of doubt and fill our hearts with faith? I want to show you something before I end this with a little bit of a prayer service. A few years ago, I can't say the word COVID. Do you remember COVID? Oh my gosh. During COVID, I got a gift. I don't drink a lot of coffee. I drink 1 cup a day because I have this terrible thing called acid reflux. And I don't have it unless I have too much caffeine. I stopped drinking soda. I haven't had soda in years, not even sipping in years. I don't drink soda, and I only drink 1 cup of coffee a day. I used to drink, I hate to say that, but I used to drink a lot. And if you can do that, God bless you, because I love the taste of coffee, 1 cup a day. But I got this gift from somebody who knew I was not being able to drink coffee. And it's very simple. It says, wake, pray, coffee. And I thought, in those 3 words, how cool is that? They're like, yeah, it's not praying. And, I said this, I thought, you're a religion person, you probably like this. You know what I mean? It's that occupational act. But think about that. When I start my day, I'm going to wake, I'm going to pray first, and then whatever I need to, what else? I got to fill myself with God before I fill myself with the gel. You know what I mean? With the caffeine. I think it's interesting. And in that cup, this whole idea of what we've been talking about, emptying the cup and drinking from the saucer, has led to what I want to do here at the end with this final prayer, kind of a prayer service, if you don't mind participating. I'm going to ask you to actually move. If you notice when you walked in, there's a table filled with an assortment of coffee and tea mugs over there, okay? That Michelle has painstakingly put together. What I'd like you to do is this. Before you get up, I'll just tell you, I want you to get up and pick one out. And I don't want you like, just one is you're going to be kind of drawn to one. It might be a color, it might be a shape, it might be something, it doesn't matter. Just one that kind of like instantly grabs your attention. I'd like you to go pick it up and then bring it back to your seat and hold it, and then I'll make some prayer. Can we do that? All right. All right.
And the radiologist was ready to get ultrasound in the morning. My son's brother was in school. All right, everyone has a cup or a mug? Great. Inside there's a little prayer that Michelle wrote. I'd like you to take that out just to put it aside for a minute so you have the mug, just the empty mug. And I'm going to lead us through a silent, kind of
need to empty from your mind, from your heart, from your soul. Don't try to fill it with feelings or insights. Just focus on what needs emptying. Notice the room that's available in the cup for filling. Now hold the cup out slightly before you, as in the posture of a beggar. Silently ask God to fill you with what you need. Humbly and gratefully receive His grace. Reflect on the many blessings in your life. And now offer a silent prayer of gratitude for the ways that God fills you daily. Now, what you're thinking is, this cup is destined for goodwill. Because it doesn't match anything you have at home. I'm going to ask you a little homework here. I'm going to ask you to take that with you at home when you leave tonight and put it someplace for the rest of your Lent. Put it someplace where you'll see it every day. That might be your nightstand. It might be a centerpiece of your table. Put it someplace where you'll be reminded of what you need to empty and what you need to be filled with. Keep that prayer in there. Take that prayer out, maybe and pray it. Give yourselves 3.5 minutes of silence like you did tonight to reflect on that. But if you keep that as a reminder, the lessons of emptying and filling will not just stop when you walk out the door here. It's something that will continue. I would hope, in an ideal world, that you would keep this mug or cup even longer. Keep it something. Put it in your rotation of coffee cups. And every now and then when you take it out to think of it, think about the things you need to empty and things that you want to be filled with God's grace and God's love. I want to end with one last psalm reference. Lord, when your glory appears, my joy will be filled, and will be full. That's what we're told in Psalm 17. And I love this image of the empty tomb. And this is really, if I could summarize our 2 days together, 2 evenings together, it would be this. It's because of the tomb that was empty that we can be filled with joy and the promise of the love. An empty tomb fills us with joy. And that's what we're all about. That's what our Lent is for. That's what our life as Catholics is about. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for being here. Thank you for coming and being attentive. If this was new for you, if this was something you were comfortable with, thank you for going outside of your comfort zone. I want to thank everybody at St. Frank's here for inviting me. Yes, give it.
Can I share a story about how Bill's life helped?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm writing my memoirs, and I've been going through my life history, all the experiences that I've been having. And it started when I was about 3 years old. I stepped off a curb in a car. I almost got hit by a car. And it reminded me of the bump that you said about
Yep. Helping the coffee.
Ever since that time, I always felt that somebody or something was watching over me. I've been going through numerous stories in this memoir that I've been writing, from the time that I almost got hit by the car, by the time I almost fell off a girder and bridge and fell. So I had a couple of life-threatening experiences, but I always had this one thought that something was looking over me. Recently, in the last 5 years, I've gone through 2 different cancers, and I've survived those. So I'm writing all of this stuff, and every time I get through a different story, I'm thinking about the guardian angel. The nuns told us that every person is born with the guardian angel, and they stay with you for the rest of your life. So it kind of fascinated me. But while I'm writing this stuff, it's difficult for me to sleep all the way through the night. So I get up, and I look at my alarm clock, and it says 3:33. And I didn't pay any attention to it, but it was a very weird number to me. So I remember the next morning, I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, exactly 3:33. And each time I got out of the bed, I rolled out of the bed, and instead of looking at my watch that I usually did, I looked and I noticed these numbers, 3:33. A couple days later, I look at my watch, go to the bathroom, come back. A couple days later, I didn't do any of that stuff. I just went to the bathroom, I came in, and as I was getting into the bed, I saw the number 3:33. I just thought it was very weird and strange. So, I'm thinking again about these guardian angel things. I get an audiobook from a podcast, and I'm listening to this thing, and I'm shoveling snow on Christmas Eve, and it tells how people should recognize signs and get connected with the guardian angel. So it's telling me about you can do certain songs or anything else like this, and it says there's a number patterns, and it goes through and it says 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. So now I'm convinced that I am connected with my guardian angel, and there's another little plot in this story because over 35 or 40 years ago, Shelley and I were given a guardian angel from my parents, and it always sat on the shelf. Never really paid attention to it until now, just recently, because it's still on the shelf. So I take a look at it, and I look it up, I turn it over, and it's Archangel Gabriel, who is a messenger, a celestial messenger that I learned that it's written in the Bible, which I've never read, but maybe I should. But it's written in the Bible about you should give this message. So now I'm compelled to share this message to everybody here to look for signs to connect with your guardian angel. And this, telling you this story, is going on.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I agree with you. I mean, we need to look for signs. Signs are, we have to see God in all ways, Thomas Aquinas said. So yeah, I believe that. I have used this example before. Have you ever bought a new car? And new to you, whether it's used or not is irrelevant, but if it's new to you, if you ever bought a new car, and then when you drive around, you start to realize, I see that there. Somebody else has got the same time doing it. There's a name for that phenomenon, I don't know what it is. But because I'm driving that car, now I'm more aware of it. I'm convinced that the more we see God in our lives, the more we will see God in our lives. The more we see 333, what have you, the more we see those signs, calling the cardinal on the bush outside after your parent has passed away, whatever it is, the more we see signs like that remind us of God, the more we're going to see those things. I don't believe, I'm too old to believe in coincidences. G.K. Chesterton called them there are no coincidences, he calls them spiritual puns. God is trying to get our attention with something. So I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for having me. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Was this helpful? I hope it was a great rest of your life. Hey, did you want to say anything?
Just a couple things. In your booklet, if you want to take that home with you, there's some commercials for our next upcoming lifetime items that we're doing. I want to put a personal plug in for Taizé Prayer next week Thursday, right back here. It's going to be beautiful. I hope you can make it. Candlelight, silence, song. It's going to be wonderful. We have another Eucharistic adoration plan for Thursday, April 3rd, and then family stations of the cross. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I think you all know how to connect with me. So if something moved you in these last 2 days, if you have a suggestion for me, please feel free to email me. I would like to put a few quotes together about what we kind of reflected on and collectively learned in our time here. So if you feel inspired, please feel free to email me. If you would like to take a coffee mug to someone that you know that wasn't able to be here as a reminder of what we did and the sharing, please take one. We have leftovers. And our free will offering is still available. If you weren't here yesterday or you feel so inspired to add to our free will offering, we would appreciate it. So safe travels home, and thank you so much.
I can send you a PDF of all of these slides of both nights so that you can make them available online. How are we going to do that? That way, if there are quotes that you thought that you didn't write down, I can do
And we
that.
also did videotape
Thanks again, everybody. It's great to see you.